The quantum decay alarm shrieked through the observation deck of the Remembrance, its metallic wail cutting through the void of deep space like a knife through flesh. Daniel Martinez pressed his forehead against the reinforced plasteel viewport, his breath fogging the surface as he watched the dying star system collapse in on itself. Light years away, yet visible through the ship's enhanced optics. "Commander Martinez," the ship's AI intoned, its voice clinical and devoid of warmth. "Specimen 749 requires immediate attention. Nutritional dispensation is 14 cycles overdue." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Specimen 749. The designation felt like acid on his tongue, even though he'd never spoken it aloud. To everyone else on this godforsaken research vessel, she was just another xenobiological sample, catalogued, categorized, and contained. To Daniel, she was Jassy. He found her in Containment Bay 7, curled in the corner of her environmental chamber, her luminescent fur dimmed to a sickly gray. The Vathari were apex predators on their homeworld, before the Confederation's pacification protocols had rendered their planet a smoldering wasteland. Jassy was barely a juvenile when the collectors found her, one of 3 survivors from a species that once numbered in the billions. "Hey there, little one," Daniel whispered, pressing his palm against the barrier. The containment field hummed, a barely perceptible vibration that separated them like an ocean. Jassy's 4 eyes opened, 2 primary, 2 secondary, each one reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting of the bay. She was small for her species, barely reaching Daniel's waist when she stood on her hind legs. Her 6-fingered hands, tipped with retractable claws that could slice through titanium hull plating, trembled as she approached. "Why do you keep me?" The translation matrix rendered her chittering vocalizations into standard English, but something was lost in the conversion. Daniel heard the raw desperation beneath the words, the existential anguish that no machine could fully capture. It wasn't the first time she'd asked. But tonight, something in her voice was different, final. Daniel's hand fell away from the barrier. Through the viewport behind him, he could see the research team's latest trophy, another xenobiological specimen in cryostasis, this one from the Andari Collective. The Confederation called it preservation. Daniel called it what it was, a museum of extinction, cataloging species they'd destroyed. "The nutritional paste is on its way," he said, deflecting. "I made sure they added the mineral supplements you like." "That is not an answer, human Daniel." Jassy's form shifted, her bioluminescent patterns flickering in sequences that Daniel had learned to recognize as distress. "The others of my kind, the 2 who came before, they are gone now. Dissected for science. Studied until there was nothing left to study. I hear the researchers talking. They wonder how long before I, too, am more useful in pieces than whole." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. She was right. Last month, when Specimen 747 had developed a respiratory infection, the medical team's treatment had involved full vivisection to better understand Vathari physiology. When Daniel had objected, citing the species' endangered status, he'd been reminded that his role was security, not ethics. Specimen 748 had lasted 3 weeks longer before suffering a similar fate. "I won't let them," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are 1 human among 47. Your authority is limited. Your power is Jassy's translator struggled with the next word. "Insufficient." She wasn't wrong. Daniel was a security officer, not a scientist or a commanding officer. His job was to ensure the specimens didn't escape, that the containment protocols remained intact. He was, in essence, a glorified zookeeper for the galaxy's last remnants of species humanity had helped exterminate. The nutritional dispenser chimed, and a gray paste oozed into Jassy's feeding trough. She didn't move toward it. Instead, she pressed her small, furred body against the containment barrier, as close to Daniel as the field would allow. "Why do you keep me?" she asked again, and this time Daniel heard what she was really asking. "Why do you keep me alive? Why do you keep me imprisoned? Why do you keep me from joining my people in whatever comes after this existence?" Daniel sank to his knees, eye level with her now. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, and for a moment, He saw not a xenobiological specimen, but a child scared, alone, and waiting for the universe to deliver its final cruelty. "Because you're mine," he said, and the words came out broken, fractured by the weight of their truth. Jassie's eyes widened, all four of them focusing on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "The day they brought you aboard," Daniel continued, his voice thick with emotion he'd suppressed for months, "you were barely conscious, dehydrated, injured. The collection team had used neural disruptors banned by 14 interstellar treaties to subdue you. When I carried you to this chamber, you looked up at me with those eyes, and I—" He paused, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I made you a promise. I promised that as long as I drew breath, they wouldn't take you apart like the others. That you'd be more than a specimen number in their database." "But why?" Jassie's voice was small now, childlike. "I am not human. I am not your kind. My people tried to resist the Confederation. We were designated as hostile. You were defending your home," Daniel interrupted, "and they labeled you monsters for it." The containment bay fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems and the distant thrum of the ship's engines. Daniel stood, his hand returning to the barrier between them. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice steady now, "there's a supply shuttle arriving from Outpost Karzan. The security protocols will be loose during the transfer. The shuttle's destination is the neutral reaches far beyond Confederation space." Jassie's bioluminescence flickered rapidly, surprise, confusion, hope. "You would—" "But they would know. They would punish—" "Yeah," Daniel said, a grim smile crossing his face. "They would. Then why?" Daniel pressed his forehead against the barrier, closing his eyes. "Because you're mine to protect, Jassie. Not mine to own. I keep you because keeping you alive, truly alive, not just existing in this cage, is the only thing that lets me sleep at night. The only thing that makes me anything other than complicit in what the Confederation has done." When he opened his eyes, Jassie was standing on her hind legs, her small hands pressed against the barrier opposite his. Her fur had regained some of its luminescence, shifting through colors Daniel had learned meant gratitude, affection, and something deeper that the translation matrix had no word for. "Human Daniel," she said softly. "If tomorrow I am free, what becomes of you?" Daniel laughed, a sound without humor. "I'll figure something out. I usually do. That is not an answer." "No," he admitted. "It's not." The quantum decay alarm sounded again, reminding them both that even stars die, that all things end. But in that moment, in the harsh light of Containment Bay 7, Daniel and Jassie existed in a bubble outside of time, a human and the last cub of a dying species, connected by something the Confederation scientists could never quantify or understand. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight they had this, a promise kept, and the defiant declaration that some bonds transcend species, politics, and the cold calculations of empire. "Get some rest, little one," Daniel said, finally stepping back from the barrier. "Tomorrow you go home, wherever that might be now?" As he left the containment bay, he didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen Jassie curled up again. But this time her bioluminescence pulsed steady and strong, the Vathri expression for hope.